Let me tell you something. When a woman you barely know shows up at your door dripping wet, looks at you with those deep brown eyes, and says, "I'm getting so wet," there is no right way to respond. There just isn't. Your brain doesn't give you options. It gives you panic. Pure electrical, short-circuiting panic. So what did I do? I grabbed a towel, a faded, slightly stained kitchen towel that I'd owned for way too long, and I thrust it toward her like it was a life raft. She looked at the towel. She looked at me. Then she looked back at the towel. "Sir," she said slowly, fighting back a grin, "I just came in from the rain." She was soaking wet from head to toe. Her blouse was clinging to her shoulders. Her hair was plastered against the side of her face. And there I was, standing frozen with a towel in my outstretched hand and absolutely zero dignity left. That was the moment everything changed between me and Clara, and that towel, that ridiculous, embarrassing towel, somehow became the beginning of the greatest love story of my life. Before I tell you how this story unfolds, do me a quick favor. Tap that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always love seeing which corners of the world these love stories reach. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. To understand how I ended up standing in that doorway with a towel and a racing heart, I need to take you back about 3 months. I had just come out of a relationship that nearly broke me. Her name was Diane. We were together for 4 years, engaged for one of those, and 3 months before the wedding she sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Richard, I care about you, but I don't think I'm in love with you, and I think you already know that." She was right. I did know. After the breakup, I moved into a small apartment in a quiet complex on the outskirts of Savannah. One bedroom, a little kitchen, a balcony that overlooked a courtyard with magnolia trees. It was the kind of place where people came to start over, or to hide. I was doing both. For 3 months, I did nothing but go to work, come home, and stare at walls that still didn't feel like mine. I managed a hardware supply warehouse during the day, and at night I'd sit on that balcony with a glass of sweet tea and wonder if this was it, if this quiet, hollow life was all I had left. Then she moved in. I heard her before I saw her. It was a Saturday morning, and I was half asleep on my couch when I heard music coming from the apartment next door. Loud, unapologetic gospel music, the kind that rattles picture frames and makes you feel like Sunday came a day early. I got up, opened my front door to see what was happening, and that's when I saw her for the first time. She was carrying a box that was clearly too heavy for her, walking sideways through her apartment door, singing along with the music at full volume without a care in the world. She had dark brown skin, natural hair pulled up in a wrap, and the kind of energy that made the entire hallway feel alive. She spotted me standing in my doorway and stopped singing mid-note. "Oh," she said, adjusting the box on her hip. "Hi, I'm Clara. I'm your new neighbor. Sorry about the music. I can't move furniture in silence. It's physically impossible for me." "It's fine," I said. "Do you need help with that?" She looked down at the box, then back at me, and grinned. "I thought you'd never ask." I spent the next 4 hours helping Clara move into her apartment. She had more books than furniture, boxes and boxes of novels, poetry collections, textbooks, journals, and she had a very specific opinion about where every single one of them should go. "No, the fiction goes on the left wall," she said, pointing. Organized by how much they made me cry, least emotional on top, devastated me for weeks on the bottom shelf where I can reach them when I need a good sob. "That's the strangest shelving system I've ever heard of." "That's because you've been organizing books wrong your entire life." She said it with such absolute confidence that I almost believed her. By the time we finished, it was late afternoon. Clara ordered takeout. She didn't ask me if I wanted some, she just ordered enough for two and handed me a plate like it was already decided. And we sat on her living room floor surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, eating fried rice and talking like we'd known each other for years. She told me she'd just moved from Charleston. She'd been teaching high school English there, but after a bad breakup she needed a fresh start. A man she'd given 2 years of her life to had been seeing someone else behind her back. "I found out from a friend," she said. Not bitter, just matter of fact. She sent me a screenshot of him out with the other woman. Same restaurant he used to take me to. Same booth. I shook my head. "But I'm not angry about it anymore," she continued. I was for a while. I threw a shoe at his car, which I don't recommend, by the way. Those were good shoes. But eventually I realized he didn't waste my time. He just showed me what I don't want. And now I know exactly what I'm looking for. She glanced at me when she said that last part. Just for a second. Quick enough that I almost missed it. But I didn't miss it. That night, after I went back to my apartment, I stood on my balcony and realized something strange. For the first time in 3 months, the silence didn't bother me, because I knew that on the other side of the wall, someone was there, someone alive and loud and full of light, and she was right next door. Over the next few weeks, Clara made it impossible to stay invisible. She knocked on my door at least 3 times a week. To borrow sugar she never returned, to ask if I'd heard a weird noise from the ceiling, to show me a paragraph from a book she was reading because she said it sounded like something I would think. "How do you know what I think?" I asked her once. "Because you're easy to read, Richard. You just don't know it yet." She started cooking for me without being asked. I'd come home from work and find a plate wrapped in foil sitting outside my door with a sticky note that said things like, "You looked tired this morning. Eat this. See, or I made too much. That's a lie. I made this for you. See." Every time it was Clara who pushed things forward. Every single time. One evening she knocked on my door and said, "I need a taste tester and you're the only person I know in this city, so congratulations. You've been drafted." I spent that night sitting on her kitchen counter while she made 3 different versions of sweet potato pie, feeding me spoonfuls and watching my face for a reaction like a scientist running an experiment. "That one?" I said after the 3rd version. "That's the one." She raised an eyebrow. "Why that one?" "Because it tastes like something my grandmother would have made. It tastes like home." She went quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, not her usual big bright smile, but something softer. "That might be the best compliment anyone's ever given me," she said. She put the spoon down, leaned against the counter, and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, like she was studying me, measuring me against something she'd been carrying in her mind for a long time. Before we continue, I want to say this. My name is David. About a year ago, my partner looked at me and said, "I'm not in love with you anymore." I slept on the couch that night, 7 hours in the dark, and around 4 in the morning, I realized she wasn't wrong. The man she fell for had been slowly disappearing for years. I was too busy going through the motions to notice. I wrote a book about how I got her back and how I became the man I was supposed to be. Once I did, she couldn't get enough of me. Every mistake, every fix, it's all in there. Doesn't matter if you're married or just dating. And if she hasn't started drifting yet, even better. Read this now before she does. Stay ahead of it. The link is below. It's honest. It's everything I wish someone had told me. Now let's continue. "You know what I've noticed about you, Richard?" she said. "What?" "You don't try to impress me. Most men I've known, they perform, they tell you what they think you want to hear. They show you a version of themselves that's polished and safe. But you just show up. You eat my pie and tell me it tastes like your grandmother's kitchen. You carry my boxes for 4 hours and don't ask for anything in return. You listen when I talk. Actually listen, not just wait for your turn to speak." She shook her head slowly. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever described me like that. Nobody had ever made the ordinary things I did sound like they mattered. "I'm not doing anything special," I said. "That's exactly the point," she whispered. "You don't even know you're doing it, and that makes it real." She held my gaze for a beat too long, long enough for the air between us to thicken, long enough for my pulse to quicken, and then she turned back to her pie like nothing had happened. But something had happened. We both knew it. Our routine deepened. She started calling me during the day. At first it was quick, a joke she'd heard, a question about the best grocery store nearby. But the calls got longer. We'd start with a question and end up talking for 2 hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her students back in Charleston, the ones who struggled, and the ones who surprised her, about the novel she'd been trying to write since college. I told her about the woodworking hobby I'd picked up after the breakup, about the bookshelf I was building from reclaimed oak. "You make things with your hands," she said one night, her voice soft through the phone. "That tells me a lot about you, Richard." "What does it tell you?" "It tells me you're a man who needs to create something. Not just exist, but actually build. That's rare. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me before. Diane used to call my woodworking your little projects. Clara called it something that mattered. One night, around 11:30, my phone rang. Clara's name on the screen. "Did I wake you?" she asked. "No. I was reading." "Good. Because I need you to settle something for me. I've been lying here for an hour trying to decide if pecan pie is better with whipped cream or without, and I can't sleep until I have the answer. You called me at 11:30 at night to ask about pie. Richard, pie is serious business. Don't dismiss it." We talked about pie for exactly 45 seconds. Then we talked about everything else for 2.5 hours. She told me about the first boy she ever loved, a kid named Terrence from her 7th grade class, who gave her a note that said, "I like your laugh. Do you want to share my chips at lunch?" She talked about how Terrence moved away that summer and she never saw him again, and how she spent the whole 8th grade writing letters she never sent. "That's the thing about love when you're young," she said. "You give it away so easily because you don't know what it costs yet. But once you've had your heart broken, really broken, not just bruised, you start guarding it. Maybe too much. Maybe to the point where you almost miss it when it shows up right next door." I asked her if she felt like she was guarding hers now. She paused for so long. I thought the call had dropped. "I was," she said finally, "but something about being around you is making me lower the walls. Something about the way a certain someone looks at me when he thinks I'm not paying attention." Neither of us acknowledged what that fully meant. We just said goodnight and hung up. But I lay in the dark for another hour listening to my own heartbeat, realizing that a woman separated from me by one thin wall had already reached into a part of me I thought was sealed shut. Then came the night that changed everything. The night of the towel. It was a Sunday in late September. The forecast had called for light showers, but what we got was a monsoon, the kind of storm that turns the sky green and makes you check the windows twice. I was in my kitchen making dinner when I heard frantic knocking on my door. I opened it, and there was Clara, completely drenched, water streaming down her face, her blouse dark and heavy with rain, keys clutched in her shaking hand. "My lock is jammed," she said breathlessly. "I've been standing outside for 10 minutes trying to get in, and—" She stopped, looked down at herself, then looked at me with those brown eyes and said, "I'm getting so wet." And I, in the most spectacular display of panic in human history, grabbed a towel and shoved it at her. Clara looked at the towel, then looked at me, then burst into that full, beautiful, room-filling laugh. "Richard," she said between gasps, "I just meant the rain. My door is stuck and I'm soaked." "I know that," I said, even though every cell in my body was screaming at me to disappear into the floor. "Then why do you look like you just saw a ghost?" I couldn't answer. I just stood there, towel in my outstretched hand, my face burning hot enough to dry her off without any fabric needed. She took the towel gently, patted her face, and then looked at me, really looked at me, with an expression that shifted from amusement to something deeper, something knowing. "You like me," she said. Not a question, a statement. "You really like me, Richard." The hallway went silent except for the rain hammering against the windows. "Yes," I said, because there was no point in lying anymore. Not to her, not to a woman who could read me like one of her books. And then, slowly, like the sunrise breaking over water, Clara smiled. Not the bright smile she used when she was being funny. Not the polite smile she gave delivery drivers. This was something different, something private and tender, and just for me. "Well," she said softly, stepping closer, "it's about time you said it. Because I've been waiting, Richard. I've been waiting for weeks." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that smile, that voice, those words. I've been waiting for weeks. She'd been feeling this too, all along. Every call, every plate of food outside my door, every excuse to knock, it had all been her way of reaching toward me, hoping I'd reach back. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Thank you for the towel, Richard. Best towel I've ever received." I stared at those words for 5 full minutes. Then I typed back, "Anytime. I have a whole collection." Her reply came instantly. Then I might have to get wet more often. My heart nearly came through my chest. From that day forward, everything between us was different. The daily visits took on a new electricity. Our conversations became more intimate. Not physical, but emotional. She started sharing things she said she'd never told anyone, about the shame she carried from her last relationship, how she blamed herself for not seeing the signs, about the loneliness that crept in at 3 in the morning, about the fear that maybe she'd already given her best love to someone who didn't deserve it, and there was nothing left. "That's not how love works," I told her one evening as we sat on my balcony, watching the sun melt into the trees. "It doesn't run out. How do you know? Every time you walk into a room, something wakes up inside me, something I thought was gone for good." She was quiet for a long time. Then she reached over and took my hand. Not dramatically, not urgently, just gently, like she was picking up something precious that she didn't want to break. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I've been feeling it since the day you helped me carry those boxes. I just didn't know if you were ready." "I don't know if I'm ready either," I admitted, "but I know I don't want to miss this." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat there in the warm Georgia evening, holding hands, listening to the world go quiet around us. But just as things were beginning to bloom, fear crept in. Not from Clara, from me. I started pulling back. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in small ways that I hoped she wouldn't notice. I'd cut our phone calls a little shorter. I'd pretend I wasn't home when she knocked. I'd leave earlier in the morning so we wouldn't bump into each other in the hallway. The truth was, I was terrified. My engagement had fallen apart. What made me think I could do it right this time? What made me think I deserved someone like Clara, a woman who was whole and brave, and so full of life that she made every room brighter just by being in it? I told myself I was protecting her, that she deserved someone who wasn't carrying the wreckage of a failed relationship, that she was too full of light to be weighed down by a man who still hadn't figured out how to trust himself. But the truth was uglier than that. I wasn't protecting her. I was protecting myself. Because if I let Clara all the way in and it fell apart, I didn't think I'd survive it a second time. So I built walls, quietly, carefully, brick by brick, the same walls she'd been tearing down for months. Clara noticed, of course. She'd spent years reading the body language of teenagers who were afraid to tell the truth. A man pulling away emotionally was child's play for her. One evening, she knocked on my door. Not her usual playful knock, a firm, deliberate one. I opened it and found her standing there with a paper bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About why you're running away from the best thing that's ever happened to you." She walked past me, went straight to my kitchen, found 2 glasses, poured the wine, and sat down at my table like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "Sit down, Richard." I sat. "You've been pulling away," she said. Not accusatory, not angry. Just factual, the way a woman says something she's already thought about for a long time. "And I need to know why. Because if it's because you don't feel what I feel, I can handle that. I'm a grown woman, and I've survived. But if it's because you're scared, if it's because you think you don't deserve this, then I need you to hear something." She set her glass down and looked at me with those eyes, those deep, steady, unwavering eyes. "Richard, your engagement falling apart was not a verdict on your worth. It was a chapter that closed. That's all. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you failed. It means that story ran its course. And now, right now, there's a new story trying to begin, and you're the only one standing in its way." I felt something crack inside me. Not break, crack, like sunlight pushing through a boarded-up window. "I'm scared," I said. And I meant it. Clara reached across the table and placed both of her hands over mine. "Baby," she said, "I'm scared too. You think I'm not? I gave 2 years of my life to a man who was lying to my face the entire time. I packed up everything I owned and moved to a city where I knew nobody. I'm sitting in the kitchen of a man I've only known for a few months, telling him I have feelings for him. You think that doesn't scare me? Then why are you here? Because being scared is not a good enough reason to miss out on something beautiful. Life is too short, and love is too rare to let fear make your decisions for you." I looked at her, this incredible woman sitting in my kitchen, pouring out her heart with a courage I could only dream of, and I made a choice. Not a grand, cinematic choice, a quiet human one. I chose to stop running. "I don't want to miss this either," I said. She smiled. That same slow, warm, private smile from the night of the towel? Then don't. That night, we sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours. We didn't run out of things to say. She told me about the moment she found out her ex was cheating, how she was sitting on her couch eating takeout when the screenshot came through, and how she sat there for 10 minutes just staring at the phone, unable to feel anything at all. I told her about the morning Diane ended things, how she held my hands across the table and said, "I hope you find someone who makes you feel alive, Richard. You deserve that." We shared our scars, not to compare them, but to understand them. And in that sharing, something deeper than attraction took root, something that felt like recognition, like I had been searching for her my entire life without knowing it, and she had been doing the same. Clara stayed until midnight. When she stood to leave, I walked her to my door. She turned, put one hand on my chest, right over my heart, and said, "I can feel it beating fast." "It does that around you," I said. She rose on her toes, kissed me on the cheek, soft, deliberate, lasting, and whispered, "Good. Good night, neighbor." After that night, we didn't hold back anymore. Clara became the center of my world, not because I needed her to, but because she chose to be. She started letting herself into my apartment on Wednesday evenings with groceries, and we'd cook together side by side in the kitchen, her hip brushing mine as she reached for spices. She reorganized my bookshelf by genre, and then by how much each book made her cry because she said my system had no soul. She hung curtains in my bedroom because she said the morning light was attacking me. She brought flowers, fresh flowers, every week because she said a home without flowers was just a building. And she talked. Lord, how that woman could talk. She told me stories about her students, the girl who could barely read when the school year started and was writing her own short stories by June, the boy who came to class every day angry at the world until Clara kept him after school one afternoon and he broke down crying because nobody at home ever asked how his day went. She talked about how teaching had given her life meaning and how she wanted to find a position here in Savannah, a school that needed her. She made me feel seen, not in the superficial way, not noticed or acknowledged, but truly seen. She understood the parts of me that I had spent years hiding, the doubt, the loneliness, the fear that maybe I'd already experienced the best moments of my life and everything from here was just coasting. Clara destroyed that fear. She demolished it with her laughter and her honesty and her stubborn, relentless belief that the best was still ahead. Months passed. We grew closer in ways I didn't know were possible. We took walks along the riverfront at sunset. We drove to Tybee Island and sat on the beach with our shoes off, watching the tide roll in. She rested her head on my shoulder and said, "I forgot what peace felt like. Thank you for reminding me." One evening in late spring, I invited Clara over for dinner. But this time was different. I spent all day preparing. I cleaned my apartment top to bottom. I cooked her favorite, garlic shrimp with grits, collard greens, and cornbread from scratch. I set the table with candles and the nicest plates I owned, and in the pocket of my jacket, folded inside a small velvet box, was a ring. Not a diamond. Clara wasn't a diamond kind of woman. It was a simple gold band with a garnet stone, deep red, warm, and timeless, that I'd found at an antique shop in the historic district and knew immediately was hers. When Clara walked in, she stopped in the doorway and went still. She looked at the candles. She looked at me, standing there in a pressed shirt and clean shoes, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "Richard," she said carefully, "what is this?" "Dinner," I said. "This is not just dinner." "No," I admitted, "it's not." We sat down. We ate. We talked. But the air between us was charged with something neither of us was naming. Clara kept glancing at me, studying me, that familiar curiosity playing across her face. After dinner, I took her hand and led her to my balcony. The night was clear, stars everywhere. The jasmine from the courtyard below was blooming, and the scent of it filled the air like a promise. "Clara," I said, and my voice cracked on her name. I cleared my throat and started again. "Clara, before you moved in next door, I was disappearing. I was in a relationship for 4 years where I was comfortable but not alive. When it ended, I thought that was it. I thought my story was over. I thought the best I could hope for was a quiet apartment and a life that was fine but never full. I paused. She was watching me, her eyes glistening in the candlelight from inside. And then you showed up at my door, soaking wet from the rain, and you said 4 words that made my brain stop working. And you laughed at me when I handed you that towel. And something in that laugh, something in you, woke me up. You didn't just move in next door, Clara. You brought me back to life. I opened it. The garnet caught the moonlight and glowed. I'm not asking you to forget what you've been through. I'm not asking you to pretend you were never hurt. I'm asking you to build something new with me. Something that's ours. Something that starts with a ridiculous towel and ends with forever. Clara's hand went to her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not sad tears, not grief, just the overflow of a heart that had been waiting for exactly this moment without knowing it. She took the ring from the box. She held it between her fingers, turning it slowly, watching the stone catch the light. Then she slid it onto her own finger. She didn't wait for me to do it because that was Clara, always taking matters into her own hands. And she looked up at me with that smile, that smile. You know, she said, her voice thick with emotion. The day I moved in, I wasn't even supposed to take this apartment. I had another one across town that was cheaper and bigger. But something about this complex felt right. Something told me that if I didn't move here, I'd miss something I was never going to get again. She stepped closer, close enough that I could count the tears on her lashes. And I was right. Because I found you, the man who panicked and handed me a towel, the man who spent an entire afternoon organizing my books without complaining once, the man who builds beautiful things with his hands but didn't know he was building a beautiful life, too. She placed her hand on my chest again, right over my heart, just like that night months ago. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll build something new with you. Yes, I'll let it start with a towel. And yes, I'll let it end with forever. I pulled her close and held her, right there on that little balcony, under a sky full of stars, with the jasmine blooming below and the whole quiet world holding its breath. I held the woman who had taught me that love doesn't come with a warning or an instruction manual. It comes soaking wet, laughing at your panic, knocking on your door with excuses it didn't need, and daring you to be brave enough to hand it a towel. And that was the night I learned that the best love stories don't start with courage. They start with a towel, a terrified man, and a woman extraordinary enough to move in right next door. Look, I'll be real with you. Only a small fraction of the people watching right now are actually subscribed. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that love can still find you when you least expect it, then take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. These stories take a long time to put together, and your support is what keeps them coming. I'll see you in the next one. Every video I put out takes real time and effort, and delivering quality content to you will always be my priority. YouTube recently demonetized my channel, which has been tough, but this is what I love doing, and I'm not stopping. If you'd like to support me, even something as simple as buying me a coffee goes a long way. Just scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description. It may seem small, but it truly means the world to me. Thank you.